I listened carefully to the comments of my colleague, the senator from Connecticut, and I appreciate the frustration that he expressed about what has gone on in the last hours here and the difficulty of presenting to the country a United States Senate that appears unable to make up its mind about what resolution we ought to vote on. The fact is, Madam President, the last 24 hours in the United States Senate have not been a profile in courage, they've been a profile in politics. And rather than protect the troops, our colleagues on the other side of the aisle have decided to try to do what they can to protect the president. I think they've made an enormous mistake. The fact is that if we voted on the Warner resolution, those who support the mission, the escalation, but the mission, as the senator from Arizona said, have a chance to vote no. And those who believe the escalation is a mistake have an opportunity to vote yes. It just doesn't get any clearer than that. And no matter what happens with all this argument about the process of one resolution versus another resolution, the bottom line is that people who on Sunday shows and in hearings stand up and say they oppose the escalation were yesterday unwilling to allow the Senate to be able to vote on that. They were unwilling to have a vote of conscience on the question of the direction of this war. And so, rather than protect the troops, those troops who are about to be sent into a mission that in fact doesn't resolve the issue of Iraq and perhaps even makes it far more dangerous, certainly more dangerous for those troops being asked to perform it, are not protected by the United States Senate, making its best effort here to try to make a vote that disagrees with the president. Now, I'd ask my colleagues who say, well, I think the senator from Arizona was down here a few minutes ago asking the question of the majority leader, if you don't support the troops' mission, then aren't you, by definition, if you vote as we would like to vote here, not supporting the troops? That is just an extraordinary leap of logic that has no basis whatsoever in real reasoning. The senator from Arizona himself has criticized the policies of this administration time and again. In fact, not enough, but time and again he has said Mr. Rumsfeld was wrong, or he didn't have confidence in him, or this and that. Was that a criticism of the troops? Was that not supporting the troops? I'm absolutely confident the answer is no. I know, and we all know, the senator from Arizona supports the troops, but he's been able to draw a distinction between criticizing the policy and support for the troops. I'll tell you the best way you support the troops by getting the policy right. Right now, all over the Hill, here in Washington, there are veterans of the Iraq War who are going around and talking to congressmen and senators and the public, advocating that this mission in Iraq ought to change, that we ought to begin a process of terminating our involvement there. And they have a very different view of their own service than that which is expressed by some on the other side of the aisle. The fact is, there is a growing sentiment among many of those being asked to do this very difficult job that the missions they're being sent on don't, in fact, always make sense. Madam President, I remember, and I know the senator from Arizona remembers, what it's like to be a troop in a war. I remember being in a river in Vietnam when the Secretary of Defense was flying over us on one of his visits to take a look at what was going on. And I'll tell you, every single one of us said to each other, boy, wouldn't it be great if he came down here and talked to us and found out what we really think is going on. And we would have loved the policy to change. The fact is that more and more of the veterans that I've talked to who are returning from Iraq and some, regrettably, as Senator Dodd and I noted a few days ago, whom we met over there who have not returned alive, are against what is happening and believe there is a better way to manage this war. Madam President, what we're trying to do here is have a vote, albeit a non-binding resolution, a vote that expresses the view of the Senate with respect to this war. And we have a moral obligation to make that statement here in the Senate. It's our duty to have that vote. The soldiers in Iraq are performing their duty. Why aren't the senators of the United States Senate performing theirs? Is their duty to obstruct? Is it their duty to protect the president? to prevent a vote, even though they go out publicly and talk about their opposition to the war, their opposition to the rise, to the escalation, their belief that the direction is wrong. We're not supposed to vote in the United States Senate. President, this question of whether you support the troops or don't support the troops by sending an additional 21,000 troops over there, now's the time for the United States Senate to register its opposition to the escalation. If you pursue the logic of the other side of the aisle, and they say, well, we can't have a vote here, and we shouldn't express anything, we shouldn't try to change anything, then we're complicitous in the very process that we disagree with. If lives are lost subsequent to our unwillingness to be able to stand up and vote, do we bear any responsibility for the loss of those lives? Do you go home and say to yourself at night, to a wife or to your children, you know, I did everything possible to try to stop what's happening? When you make the next phone call to a mother or a father or a wife in your state, and you express your sorrow for the loss in the next days ahead, would you also be able to say with clear conscience that you did your best to be able to try to prevent that loss, to be able to set this war in its proper course? I don't think so, Mr. President. I don't think anybody in clear conscience can say that. I hate the fact that we're reduced here to have a vote on something that isn't, at this moment, going to be able to change the direction. But you know what? Every step is incremental. Every step is a building block. Every step helps to build the change of opinion that we need to achieve in this country, where people will understand the way you best define patriotism and the way you best defend the interests of our troops on the ground in Iraq. Surely we haven't reached a point in the United States Senate where you can't even have a debate on the most important life and death issue facing people in this country. What are we supposed to do? Pack up and go home and let the president continue to make a mistake? Are we supposed to be somehow satisfied that the president has earned the right, and the secretary, this new Secretary of Defense, who knows yet? The decisions are out. But the record of the last 5 years, 6 years, Mr. President, is one of mistake after mistake after mistake after mistake after mistake. One after the other. From the planning, to the numbers of troops, to what you do afterwards, to how you preserve the peace, to what kind of politics we're going to pursue. And so we're here doing what we can within our limited power, with 60 vote restrictions, to register our disapproval of sending an additional number of troops, which has been told to the American people is 21,000, but which in fact is over 40,000 when you finish with the support troops that are necessary. So, Mr. President, these troops deserve a policy that is worthy of their sacrifice. No United States senator that I know of is not committed to success. We'd like to be successful. But what's the definition of success now? We've heard month after month, Ambassador Khalilzad, General Casey, over 7 months ago said, this is the last 6 months for Iraq. They have a fundamental 6-month period within which they've got to get their act together, and if they don't, serious problems. Mr. President, that time came and passed. What happened? We hear another promise of the next few months. We've had months and even years now of these promises about how this is a moment of turning the corner. This is the critical moment for Iraq. This is the moment of the difference. Everybody has known for this whole last year or more that you got to resolve the oil revenues issue. As I stand here on the floor tonight, the oil revenues issue isn't resolved. They say they're making progress, they're getting closer, but it isn't resolved.